So this video is going to talk about mercury as a water pollutant. What's interesting is mercury, it's in the water through water, but not really through drinking water. It's through the fish in the water. It becomes an issue. So it's really kind of fascinating and connects to lots of different things. So mercury is an element. It's a heavy metal. Its atomic symbol is Hg. So you should be familiar that is its symbol. And atoms are conserved. So matter, if you can't break mercury down any more. It's just mercury is Hg. So what that means is in coal is, they will say, the dirtiest fossil fuel. Okay. It's got a lot of contaminants in it. It's got mercury and lead. It's got some radioactive contaminants. It's got a lot of stuff in it. When they burn it, the combustion breaks the carbon bonds and such, and you release CO2 and water. But all those other elements, lead and mercury and things, all those other elements are going to go right out the exhaust and right out that smokestack. So that's what that image is showing there, is that smokestack. And that's where that mercury is going to go out. And it's very, very, very tiny particles. Then that rain catches those particles in the air and kind of washes them down. So the particles kind of dissolve in the water, or not dissolve, but kind of get washed in the water. After a rain, how the air sometimes feels cleaner or fresher, it's really because stuff dissolves in the rain or gets trapped in the rain, and then it's not hanging in the air. So the mercury can get transported long distances by the air, and then when it rains, it's going to wash that mercury out of the air. The water all flows. Remember watersheds. It's going to eventually flow into lakes or rivers, and eventually into the ocean. And that mercury is going to settle to the bottom of those surface waters. And when it settles at the bottom, very often those surface waters, the bottom conditions are anaerobic. Anaerobic means no oxygen. So remember when we talked about aerobic and anaerobic, aerobic is no oxygen. The bottom sediments, there's a fair bit of organic matter down there. And so the conditions, the DO is so low, it's anaerobic conditions. Anoxic or hypoxic. Anoxic means no dissolved oxygen. Hypoxic means very low levels of oxygen. All that's saying is the anaerobic bacteria are at the bottom there, and then they will take that mercury and they will convert it to something called methyl mercury. Methyl is a one carbon thing. That's one carbon and three hydrogens, and that will bond to a mercury, an Hg. So it'll be CH3HG essentially is your methyl mercury. You don't need to know that. This methyl mercury, then, what happens to it is it can accumulate in the food chain. So bioaccumulation, it accumulates in the food chain. And so I'm going to show you that. So here on this image, we're going to, actually, we'll just close this picture here. We're going to shrink the picture down. So what happens is the mercury dissolves in the phytoplankton a little bit. And then what eats the phytoplankton is the zooplankton. So notice the phytoplankton is 250 times. So that methyl mercury bioaccumulates in the phytoplankton. It accumulates in the tissues of the phytoplankton. The zooplankton eat the phytoplankton, or the mysids in this example, don't worry about their names, eat the phytoplankton. And then what happens is, notice that concentration goes from 250 to 45,000. That's just a measure of like a concentration. So you're seeing, as you're going up that food chain, that concentration is increasing. That's the idea of biomagnification. So the methyl mercury is accumulated, bioaccumulated in the different organisms. And as you go up the food chain, it's biomagnified. It gets higher and higher up the food chain. And what happens is, you'll notice, like this lake trout, it's 2.8 million. So it's much, 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 much higher concentration. I'd rather have $2.8 million than $250. So much, much higher concentration. That's that biomagnification in these top predatory fish. And you can end up then getting mercury poisoning of these top predatory fish. So top predatory animals. So it could be even like birds and things that would eat these fish. So that is your environmental impacts. So what is that? Mercury poison of top predatory animals. It can lead to their death, mortality, reduced fertility, slower growth and development, and it can impact their survivability. In human health, same sort of thing here. is human health is methylmercury is associated with severe birth defects. This was first discovered in a place called Minamata Bay, Japan. There was the Chiso Chemical Corporation was dumping mercury into the bay, and the mercury settled to the bottom. It bioaccumulated and then biomagnified up the food chain. In Japan, people eat a lot of fish. And so this town, which caught a lot of its fish right there from the bay, was noticing very severe birth defects in their children. And that's where this discovery essentially came from, is that this biomagnification and bioaccumulation of the mercury and the methylmercury really toxic. In fact, this is why they will rate different fish on how much you should eat. So here, like the highest grouper, marlin, swordfish, shark, mackerel. Tuna actually is often on here. It's still pretty high in mercury. All of these are top predatory fish. And when women get pregnant, one of the things they tell them is to not, eating fish can be really good for you, but don't eat these top predatory fish. And literally they give you a list and say, don't eat these fish. And the concern is over methylmercury. So I know when I had both of my kids and I was, is at the doctor's office and I was pregnant and they're like, don't eat this fish. And I was like, oh, this is mercury and methylmercury. And they were like, just don't eat the fish. Don't be strange. But again, that's the whole idea of this. So understanding the combustion of coal puts the mercury into the air, the rain washes it out, it gets into the waterways, gets to the sediments of the waterways. The conditions there are anaerobic. Other words for that is anoxic or hypoxic. So no oxygen. So then the anaerobic bacteria convert the mercury to methylmercury. The methylmercury bioaccumulates in the plankton. And then as the zooplankton eat the photoplankton, and then as you go up the food chain, you get higher concentrations of methylmercury in the tissues of the different organisms. Those higher concentrations are called biomagnification. And this can lead to that mercury poisoning of top predatory fish, can lead to severe birth defects in humans if pregnant women eat these top predatory fish with high levels of methylmercury in them. So that is mercury, an overview. It's hard because there's a lot of stuff going on, but I love how it connects to lots of different topics. So I hope that was a helpful overview of mercury.